get a lot of anniversaries in the car world. Some of them have a lot of fuss made over them, some of them don't. But what we've got here is actually one of those anniversaries that just sort of slips under the radar. It's actually 30 years since Ford launched the Scorpio. What was effectively the final generation of the Granada. It was also the last big Ford that you could buy in Europe anyway. And it sort of spelled the end for Ford's presence in that market. Why? Well, there are lots of reasons, aren't there? Economic, political, but you can't get past the styling, can you? And I think, you know, unfortunately, that is probably one of the reasons why the Scorpio didn't sell that well. And I had one on press loan from Ford back in the late 90s, and it was this spec, this 24-valve Cosworth V6 in Ultima trim. And I remember thinking, what a nice car that was. And of course, shortly afterwards, you know, it disappeared. And I think I got a BMW of my own as well at that point. So I'm going to go back 30 years, see how the Scorpio stacks up with the benefit of hindsight. We're out on the track here at Mallory Park, and this is the smoothest tarmac you're going to drive on anywhere in Britain, isn't it? It's a racetrack, it's freshly surfaced and it's lovely. But I am already impressed by the Scorpio's ride, and it's so refined, it's amazing. You don't get many modern cars that are this quiet and this refined. Even the electrics, you know, the ride on them is not so great. But there's an elephant in the room, isn't there? And that's the styling. You just can't get away from the styling whenever you discuss the Scorpio. The car itself was effectively the previous generation Granada, and the front and rear were restyled. They borrowed door handles from the American market, Crown Victoria. But it was the styling that probably killed it in the marketplace, because it was allegedly forced on Ford of Europe by American influence, and the bug-eye look was, you know, not really aggressive enough, I guess, and almost comical, and it just didn't really suit the market for this big expensive car. The styling is just a shame though, because under the skin there's a really credible car. So what Ford did was they took the structure platform of the previous model of Granada, and they took the running gear, pretty much carried over unchanged, but they made some small but really significant improvements, specifically for handling and refinement. They changed the front lower arms to A-arms with fluid-filled rear bushes. They changed the anti-roll bar to use proper drop links, and at the back it already had the semi-trailing independent rear, but they changed the mounting to the bushes, and the subframe was strengthened, and the net effect was to transform the handling really, and certainly improve the refinement of the car. And of course by then Ford had already learned lessons from the Mondeo, and they were already working on the Focus, and you know, they'd gone from the back of the class really to right at the front of the pack for driver engagement, you know, and dynamics, and they made a huge difference to the old Granada. I mean, this Scorpio is really refined. It is whisper quiet as well, and you know, the Cologne V6 is a pretty ancient design, and it was pretty ancient even when this car was new. But Cosworth worked on it, you know, and they improved its refinement as well as its power, and it's really a nice car, you know, to drive along in. And if you shut your eyes, which I wouldn't recommend while you're driving, you wouldn't know you weren't in a car 20 years newer. You know, you come to the corner, and yes, you can feel it lean a little bit, but it doesn't feel, you know, wallowy. And I've driven all the BMWs and Mercedes of this era, and I have to say, this is more comfortable than the E34 5 Series for certain. The E39, you know, is a firmer ride. It may handle better, you know, at the limit, but of course it depends what you want, doesn't it? And today on traffic clogged roads with potholes everywhere, perhaps this kind of ride is what you want. I get the impression that if I was to push it hard there'd be a lot of tyre squeal, but you know, car's owner told me, you know, that it needs some attention to a couple of ball joints and things, but actually I can't hear any knocking, and I'm really impressed by it. I could just sort of cruise around here all day. I could do all my business calls in this car and no one would know I was in the car. It's quite interesting looking back at old road tests on these cars, because the change from Granada to Scorpio took the car from being, you know, an also-ran to being really near the top of the class. And it's quite interesting to note that the road testers in the 90s reckoned that for ride comfort, ride handling balance anyway, the Scorpio came second only to the Jaguar. Because of course, you know, the bottom end of the XJ6 range did overlap the top end of the Scorpio range. It's got quite a turn of speed as well. It's 204 horsepower, I think, by the time this car came out. And this is one of the facelift cars as well, so it's toned down the funny styling a little bit. You've got the chrome strip from the boot that was deleted, and the bumpers were reshaped, and the headlights gained a darker infill, which you know, just toned down the looks a bit. I guess a lot of these cars, you know, have been taken apart by now. They're pretty rare these days, and actually, you know, a lot of them lost their engines to the kit car brigade, and a lot went into XR4s, and you know, Capris and things like that. Yeah, shame really, but you know, if you're faced with the Cosworth engine and, you know, it's a cheap car, of course, when these cars were 500 quid, that was how you got a, you know, dose of extra power for your Sierra XR4. Cosworth did a really good job of improving the old Cologne V6, because it was never the smoothest engine, it was never that powerful either, but the twin cam conversion and all the other changes that went with it have really transformed it. The late cars like this have got Ford's own EC5 engine management and variable cam timing and things, and it feels like it's got enough power, you know, for its place in the world. It's not a rocket ship, but it's not slow either. Interesting comparison here between the bottom end of the Jaguar range and the top end of the Ford range is that, of course, you could also get a 2.9 XJ6, and I've driven a few of those. Actually, it's not as smooth as this. The 2.9 Jag engine was never that well liked. It was sort of half the V12, if you like. That's not quite the full story, but you can criticise me in the comments. Anyway, it's not as smooth as this Ford engine. Well, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? This is almost a better entry-level Jaguar than the entry-level Jaguar of the day, which is curious considering Ford owned Jaguar at the time. What do I think then after more than a few laps of Mallory Park? Well, I remain convinced that I was right 30 years ago, and you know, this is a really good car, just spoiled by the unfortunate styling. I've driven all the BMWs and Mercedes of the time, you know. I think this stood up as a credible contender. What a shame that Ford doesn't make big cars anymore, because, you know, they'd really be good at it on the basis of this one. Just a shame they dropped the ball 30 years ago, didn't they? What a shame.